Hey guys, so welcome. Today I wanted to share a short yin sequence that's based on the type of practice that I would do with my yin teacher, Paul Grilly. And sometimes at the end of the day, after we had spent a whole day doing teacher training, and maybe we'd done a more active practice in the morning, in the afternoon when everything is done, we'd finish up with a short yin sequence. And very often we would do just 2 sets of twists. And it was surprisingly effective as a way of sort of unwinding and really getting into that space very, very quickly, that kind of yogic yin space where we feel very open, spacious, and relaxed. This may have something to do with something I learned from another teacher Rod Stryker, who is a teacher I really admire and I've studied with a little bit. He likes to say, or he has said before in a workshop that I did with him, that twists are the most spiritual of asanas, of the postures. So it would make sense that just doing a few twists can really get us into a very spiritual state in a short amount of time. So this is a sequence that I'm calling Twister, okay? And it's sort of based on those experiences with those 2 teachers. So we're going to start with a cattail pose. So let's begin on our back. Just get nice and comfortable. This is called the pentacle. And pentacle isn't a yin posture. It's more of what you might call a restorative posture, where we're not exercising anything. We're not really making any changes in the body. So to do our first cattail, I'm going to move my hips over to the left side of my mat. That's optional, depends on sort of how much room you have and how much of your body you want on the mat. I take my left leg up and then I'll drop the left leg over to the right. Okay, I'm going to prop my head up on my right hand and I take the right leg and I move it back. So this is an important step. I take the legs as wide as they will go, as far apart as they will go. Very important step. Many people skip that. Okay, then I bend the knee, I reach back and I grab the foot and I want to feel the stretch in the front of this right thigh. Now your left leg, you have a lot of options. This leg could be straight, it could be bent. Okay, generally the straighter your left leg is, not the foot you're holding, the left leg, the straighter it is, the more intense the posture is going to be. Cattail is a twist, it's a back bend, it's a quad and hip flexor stretch. So there's a lot going on here. It's a complex shape, all right? So, again, if I want more intensity, if it's not enough, I can straighten my right leg. I can bring the leg closer to my face. That tends to make it more intense, whether the leg is straight or bent. And some students even take this hand, right, the right hand, and they manually pull that leg up. Okay, so you can be quite aggressive. It really just depends on if that suits your body and where you are today. I don't ever use that word aggressive, implying that it's necessarily negative. Sometimes we need to be aggressive. Sometimes aggression is good. Aggression is a yang quality. And yin and yang, again, it's not good guys versus bad guys. It's really about balance. And this is a commonly misunderstood thing that, people come into yoga, they might think yoga is all about just always relaxing and always being yin and always surrendering. But that's not really what life is about, is it? We find that sometimes we need to surrender, sometimes we need to push through resistance. So life requires yin and yang. Life is the interplay of yin and yang, male and female, night and day. Okay, it's not one is the good guy, one is the bad guy. What can happen though is sometimes we get out of balance. And so we find that every time we do something, let's say we're way too yang, then every time we do something yin, we might feel like, oh, this is so good. Oh, this is so good. Our culture is very yang, so we might be out of balance. So again, many of us might feel like when we let go of being aggressive, we feel better because we're too aggressive the rest of the time. But some people need to be more aggressive. Okay? So I hope I made that clear. That may or may not be you. Okay? And this is sometimes why we work with a teacher who knows us and can gauge, okay, do I need to be more aggressive or less? They might give us practices where we have to be quite aggressive, and we might not like that. We might not feel like that's in our nature. And yet they're trying to draw something out of us. They're trying to help strengthen and create balance, all right, for our own good. All right, so I already mentioned that you could use this hand to pull the leg up. You could rest your head on the upper part of that arm or on the ground, or you could fold up a blanket or have a little pillow under your head if you've got that in your home. I usually just keep my hand up here. And then this leg, we want to hold it no matter what. We're never letting go of this leg, and we're also not doing this. This is incorrect. And the reason is you're not really getting a stretch, and you're tightening your hamstrings. So we want to let the leg relax. We're going to use the arm to do this. So most people will pull the foot in, and you can pull it in at various angles. But some people like to kick that leg back. Okay, I'm still holding it, but it's kind of like dancer pose. And again, I can combine that with holding this foot, so I can take a really deep version of the pose, kicking back, straightening this leg. All right, and this left shoulder can lay back, which will deepen both the twist and the back bend, but only if your hips don't move. So if I do this, if I lay back and then let my hips come back, well, guess what? I'm not in the twist anymore. I'm not stretching this thigh anymore. And you might think that's very obvious, but I've actually seen students do that. So that's why when I teach these online classes, I try and be very, very clear, because over the decades that I've taught, I've just seen everything. I've seen students misinterpret and mishear everything that I say. So I try and be really clear, because I can't see you, right? This is a pre-recorded class. I have no idea what you're doing on the other end. Okay, let's unwind from this first cattail, and we'll come back onto our back, and let's just relax for a moment. And what I'd like you to do is check in and feel both thighs. Can you feel a difference? Can you feel that a change has been made? The right thigh feels different than the left thigh. And if not, that's okay. All right? But we want to see and just check. And then we'll do cattail on the other side. I'm once again going to scoot my hips over to the other side, right? And that's, again, optional. I take this left leg, I move it up, and I'm going to drop it over. I'm just going to turn so I can continue facing you, but you shouldn't need to do that. Okay, so you drop it over, take that leg back. I prop my head up, and I recommend you do that to start. Prop your head up, and then bend that knee, reach back, grab that foot. Okay, so we're pulling that foot in, trying to stretch the front of the left thigh. And again, you have all the same options available to you on this side. Now, as most of you know, there are two things we always want to check when we're doing a yoga pose. The first is that what we're doing is within the range of what we consider to be safe for our particular body. So this can vary hugely. Something that can be safe and beneficial for one person can injure somebody else. Again, my yin teacher, Paul Grilly, he liked to say that every pose is bad for somebody. Think about that for a moment. Every pose, think of the easiest yoga pose you've ever done. And there's someone out there for which doing that pose would actually be dangerous for them. Okay? So I like that, what he said, because it really emphasizes the fact that there are no safe postures, and there aren't necessarily unsafe postures either. I bring this up because as a yoga teacher, I'm on lots of yoga teacher forums and things like that. And on those forums, I'll hear teachers saying, this is not a safe posture, that is not a safe posture, this isn't safe to do. But what we find is those are very wide, broad statements, right? So in my experience teaching, what I found is something that might be appropriate for a 20-year-old might not be appropriate for an 80-year-old. But I don't want to prejudge. So some 80-year-olds, it might be fine for. And then for some 20-year-olds, they maybe shouldn't do that pose. Okay? So we want to be very, very careful of what I'm going to call dogma, which is this is the way that it is, and that's always the way that it is. So something like this pose is not safe, you should never do it, is again, it's a pretty forceful statement and it's pretty broad, it's pretty general. And in my experience, we want to be careful about that. Because what starts to happen with our yoga practice, and this can also happen in our life if we do the same thing in our life, is our yoga practice begins to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Because again, almost every pose somebody can get hurt in. So if I'm trying to avoid poses that someone got hurt, if I think, oh, someone got hurt doing this, I should stop, I shouldn't do it, then I'm going to have less and less and less I can do. And the problem with that is as I reduce what I can do, I am making my body weaker and frailer as a result. We want our yoga to take us to our edge, where we are at the interface between what is known and what is unknown, what is possible for us today and what is not yet possible for us. That is where we get the most benefit from our practice, not from always staying in the shallow end of the pool, from always being safe, and likewise, not from always trying to push ourselves further and further and further and further. So it can be a very nuanced and subtle thing, and your relationship with your edge can evolve and change as your practice evolves and changes naturally. That's how it is for many things. Okay, we have a little more than 30 seconds left here. And again, each time we come into a pose, whether it's this pose or another pose, we want to see and make sure that we feel the stretch in the right place and we feel safe, that this is within the range of what we think is safe for our body to do. 10 seconds left here. All right, let's unwind back onto our back, and again, we'll take a few moments in pentacle pose. Again, pentacle is more or less neutral. We're not trying to work different parts of our body, but some people really don't feel good in this pose. So feel free to modify it, putting something under your knees, or even to take another posture that you do find relaxing and comfortable. That's what the intention is. It's always important that we know what the intention is in a posture, because otherwise we may not be getting the benefit that's intended and we won't even know it. So we always want to know, at least a teacher needs to know, and hopefully a teacher communicates to you, this is the intention of this pose, and then you can report whether or not you think that that is happening. All right, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze, and we'll just make a few circles with our knees, massaging the sacrum and the pelvis against the ground gently. All right, this is called the leg cradle, and the idea is just to bring a little balance. And since we were still for about 10 minutes there, we just want to move, and the movement will help bring balance. Yin and yang balance one another. That's what the Taoists say. Okay, now we're going to do another twist. That's the nature of this practice. So what I'd like to do, again, I can move my hips over to the side of the mat if I'd like, edge of the mat, and I'm going to take the right knee over the left and just drop the knees to the left. Now, I like to lock my ankles in this pose, but you don't need to. You can also put something underneath the knees if necessary, or underneath your shoulder. But we basically want the shoulders to stay where they are, and then we drop the knees or the legs over to the left. This is called twisted roots, okay? And this is probably the most common twist that we do in yin yoga. So a couple things to think about in twisted roots is how close are your knees to your chest or your belly? Generally speaking, the closer your knees are to your chest or belly, the deeper the twist is. In other words, the more your right hip is drawn over your left. Again, it may seem obvious, but I have seen students do this before, okay? I've seen them roll onto their side. That is not twisting. The intention is to create spinal rotation. The way that we do that is by manipulating our shoulders and our hips. My shoulders face the ceiling, or my chest faces the ceiling. My pelvis faces the left wall there, okay? Or I could say my right hip stacks above my left hip while my shoulders stay on the same plane. Very important, because otherwise, again, we aren't getting the intended benefit, which is spinal rotation. Spinal rotation is very, very good for your spine. So this little sequence is a great thing to do, say any time that you don't have time for a longer yin sequence. You might even do it daily. You might do like a vinyasa flow, my vinyasa flow class, and then tag this on at the end. Or you could do this as, say, a prelude to doing one of my yoga nidras. So just a few minutes of yin yoga, stretching everything out, twisting, and then doing something else after that. We're about 2 minutes in here. Another thing to consider, a few other things to consider, are the arms. So there are a few basic positions for the arms. One I call a T position, which is like this. Arms just straight out to the sides. Another I call the Y position, which is the arms are straight but brought up higher. Tends to change what you're feeling in the upper part of your body, okay? How intense that stretches. Another position I call cactus arms, which looks like that. The arms are bent. Tends to not be as intense, and that might be what you're looking for. Less intensity, not more. The arms, of course, don't have to be symmetrical. You could take the left hand and rest it on your knees. That helps keep the legs where you want them. And the right arm can be, say, up in a sort of Y position. And that creates a nice stretch here for me. So I have sort of this pulling diagonally across my body from my left hip to my right shoulder. And that creates a nice stretch. The palm could be up or down. The head could be looking to the, away from the knees to the right. You could look up, and you could even look toward your knees. I just happen to be looking in this direction because I'm looking toward you. I think it's just easier that way. Another thing that happens when you change the position of your knees is it tends to change where in your spine you're feeling the twist. So knees lower tends to be less of a deep twist, and it tends to bring the effect lower. Is that good or bad? Neither. Okay, it could be good for some people, it could be bad for other people. I'm just trying to make you aware of your options, okay? Good, we have about a minute left here. I think most of you doing this class probably are well aware that there's no particular way that we need to breathe. Again, my teacher, Paul Grilly, who taught me yin and basically created yin as we know it today. He was the one that gave it that name, the style of practice, its name. and he really gave a framework from which we could teach and practice yin. Before he did that, there really wasn't a framework for doing this. I don't think he quote-unquote invented yin, because I think people have been holding postures for minutes at a time since yoga's been invented. But he really created a space and gave a name to doing this. All right, let's come back through center, and we're going to take it over to the other side. Again, I'll move my hips over, but that's optional. You don't feel that you need to do that. Left knee over right, and again, I like to lock the ankles, but your mileage may vary. And again, I'm going to actually turn myself around so that I can continue to face you, okay? Okay, so Twisted Roots is the name of this one. I always like to, when I first come into it, to play around a little bit. This is a much deeper stretch than here. It may seem like there's not really a difference. It may not visually be much of a difference, but I can feel a huge difference. And so again, you've probably heard me say before, it's not how a pose looks, but how it feels. If we're looking at the pose, this visually might be much more satisfying because my arm is coming straight out at a right angle. So we might think that that's a more conscious position for the arm to be in. But that's only if we're thinking visually. Here, I get much more stretch. And the stretching that we do in yoga is therapeutic. It is beneficial. So if anything, in spirituality, and yoga is a type of spirituality, we really want to get away from what we are seeing and believing with our eyes, if anything. Spirituality, if anything, is really about the hidden dimension of life. If we want to only look at science and what we can measure and what we can see and what we can taste and touch, that's not the realm of spirituality. It's not to say that our spirituality does not affect the realm of the seen and the heard and the touched and the tasted. Okay? I think most people that get deep enough into spirituality find that it absolutely affects their physical experience in their everyday life. But it is very often helpful, if not absolutely essential, that we spend some time turning away from our physical experience temporarily so we can get in touch with something else. What else? It can't really be put into words. This something else has been called God. It's been called the divine. It's been called your true nature. It's been called emptiness. It's been called spaciousness. It's been called presence, consciousness, awareness, spirit. I really don't care what name we give to it because it doesn't have a name. Why does it not have a name? Because it existed before names existed. So how can you have a name for something that existed before there were names? Any name that we give to it is not really its name. Another name for this is Tao. And in fact, they say that in the Tao Te Ching. Okay? So what can happen to us as human beings is we can get very attached to the name that we give to this thing, whatever it is. So we can call it Allah, we can call it Yahweh, we can call it Buddha nature. And then what we can find is if we get too attached to our name and we think other people are talking about something else when they use their name, then we might want to kill or oppress those people. their way of connecting with this thing that really doesn't have a name. Okay? And that can create a lot of problems for us. So don't worry about the name. Everything that I teach and everything that I do as a teacher, ultimately, in the long run, is pointing to this aspect of our experience. Okay? It's something that we can't see, we can't taste, we can't touch it, we can't hear it. It's not physical, but it's something that we can be in touch with. And when we're in touch with it, it changes everything. It changes everything. All right, let's go ahead and unwind back onto our back. Take a moment to relax and feel the rebound. And then let's bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze. We'll make a few circles with our knees, just releasing the tension. And then I recommend you take a few minutes on your back to relax. So this was about 25 minutes. So you might do something like 3 minutes. If you can do longer, great. I think that that would be a good idea. And if you don't have time, it's okay. It's not going to be harmful if you don't do it. It's just beneficial if you do. Again, you could go right from here into seated meditation. You could do pranayams. You could do a yoga nidra. Or you could do a more active class. This is a great way, I think, to start your day if you're feeling kind of stiff or slow. You're not really feeling like jumping around right away. And a great way to end your day. You could go right to bed after this. All right, everyone, I want to thank you for joining me and sharing your practice with me. These right now are donation-based classes, so if you got something from this and you have the means and the funds, by making a donation to me, you're helping me to support all the yogis that are using these videos, ones who may not have employment right now or have funds to pay for this. So you help me support me as a teacher, and that helps me support other people. Thanks again for joining me. Have a lovely day. If there's any way I can help support you as a teacher, reach out to me and let me know. And I'd be happy to help you any way that I can. All right. Namaste.